They didn't even pretend to grieve. I heard it with my own ears. 2 floors down from a nurse's phone on speaker. My daughter's voice, cheerful, almost giddy. Mom's plane crashed. Finally, we can sell everything. Then a laugh. A sharp, relieved laugh, as if I'd been a long-term illness that finally resolved itself. And boy, oh boy, let me tell you something about hearing your own child celebrate your death. It changes you in ways you can't come back from. Not that I wanted to come back. Not to the version of me she thought was gone, anyway. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up. Let me tell you how I ended up in that hospital bed, body shattered like dropped china, listening to my daughter plan my estate sale while I was still breathing. See, I wasn't supposed to survive that crash. Nobody was. Flight 447 went down in a ravine near the Canadian border on a Tuesday afternoon. Beautiful day, too. Not a cloud in the sky when we took off. The kind of day that makes you think nothing bad could possibly happen. 121 passengers boarded that plane. 87 died instantly. I wasn't one of them. And wouldn't you know it, that turned out to be both a blessing and the worst thing that ever happened to me. The plane came apart during descent. My row, seats 14A through 14F, just tore off, like someone ripping a page from a book. I remember the sound, this horrible metal screaming, and then nothing. Just cold, so much cold. They found me wedged between a tree and an icy ledge. Hours later, unconscious, bleeding, blue as a winter sky. The rescuer who pulled me out told me later he'd thought I was already gone. Said my lips were white. Said he only checked for a pulse because his captain made him. You're a miracle, the doctor said when I finally woke up. But here's the thing about miracles, they hurt like hell. Broken ribs. Punctured lung. They swollen so bad my own mother wouldn't have recognized me. God rest her. They had me on machines, tubes everywhere. Couldn't talk. Could barely breathe. And the pain, good grief. The pain was something else entirely. But you know what hurt worse than the broken bones? That voice. My daughter Candace. My baby girl. The one I'd held through thunderstorms and nightmares. The one I'd taught to ride a bike, make pancakes, balance a checkbook. The one I'd given everything to. And she was laughing. The nurse didn't know I was awake. She'd left her phone on the counter while she went to grab fresh linens. I shouldn't have heard it. Probably wasn't meant to. But I did. Mom's plane crashed. Finally, we can sell everything. Finally. Like I'd been a burden. Like I'd been standing in the way of something she wanted. Like my death was the solution to a problem I didn't even know I was causing. They brought me in as a Jane Doe. My purse and ID had been stolen during the evacuation. Chaos, you know. People grabbing anything they could. So when they pulled me from that wreckage, I had nothing. No wallet, no phone, no proof of who I was. The manifest listed me as missing. Presumed dead. It makes things easier, the nurse had told me. Less pressure from family when there's no one calling every hour. I didn't correct her. Couldn't really. Not with a punctured lung and a face that looked like it had been through a meat grinder. But also, I didn't want to. Because in that moment, lying in that hospital bed, listening to my daughter celebrate my supposed death, I made a decision. A cold one. The kind that settles in your bones and doesn't leave. I decided not to tell them I was alive. Not yet. Let me tell you about Candace. My daughter. My only child. She used to call me Mommy. Sweet little voice, always reaching for my hand. Then it became Mom, clipped and efficient. Then, eventually, nothing at all. Unless she needed money. And holy cow, did she need money often? I'd given her the down payment for her first condo. $30,000 I'd saved over 5 years. Working double shifts at the hospital where I did billing. Never bought myself new clothes. Drove the same car for over a decade. But Candace needed a place, and I was her mother, so I gave it. Then there was Bree's private kindergarten. My granddaughter. Sweet child, all big eyes and curiosity. Candace said the public school wasn't good enough. Said Bree deserved better. That tuition was $12,000 a year. I paid it. Then came the divorce. Candace's husband ran off with someone half his age, left her with debt and a wounded ego. Credit cards maxed out. House payment due. She called me crying. I paid that too. She never said thank you. Not really. Just told me I was generous. Like I was some charitable foundation. Not her mother. Not a person who ate ramen for dinner so she could have steak. Just generous that night I couldn't sleep. The machines beeped. The fluorescent lights hummed. My body screamed with every breath. I stared at the ceiling and counted tiles. 23. Then I counted again. Still 23. I couldn't stop shaking. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face at 12 years old. Standing in the kitchen doorway before school, backpack too big for her tiny shoulders. She'd kissed my cheek and said, "Love you, Mommy." Where had that child gone? What had I done wrong? Or worse, what hadn't I done at all? The next morning, a man came. Suit, tie, shoes so polished they reflected the ceiling lights. He said he was from the airline. Gave me a card I couldn't read through my swollen eyes. He smiled, the kind of smile that's practiced in mirrors. "We're offering settlements," he said smoothly. "Undisclosed amounts, time sensitive. We want to help families move forward." I could barely speak. My jaw was wired shut, but I managed to nod. He didn't know I was the woman with no family rushing to find her. No vigil, no candlelight gathering, no crying daughter calling every hospital in the state. Just silence. And apparently a real estate listing. The nurse told me later. She didn't mean to. She was just making conversation while changing my four. Sweet girl, couldn't have been more than 25. "Must be nice not having family hovering," she'd said. I had a patient last month whose daughter called 17 times a day. Drove everyone crazy. No calls. I'd managed to whisper, "Not for you, honey. Maybe they don't know where you are yet. Give it time." But I knew better. They knew I was on that flight. Knew it went down. And Candace hadn't called a single hospital. Hadn't filed a missing person report. Hadn't done anything except one thing. List my house for sale. The nurse showed me on her phone. She didn't mean to be cruel. She thought I'd want to see what people were saying about the crash. Scrolling through local news, and there it was. My house. My home. Charming, well-loved home with vintage appeal, the listing said. There were photos. Professional ones. Someone had staged it. Moved my furniture around. Removed all the personal photos from the walls. The living room where I'd held Candace during thunderstorms. Now it had generic throw pillows and a sign that said, "Home Sweet Home" in cursive. The backyard where we'd planted daffodils when she was 6. Cleared, mulched, ready for the next owner to make their own memories. My bedroom, where I'd cried myself to sleep after Walter died. Painted, neutral, empty of everything that made it mine. And the price. Good Lord, the price. She was selling it for twice what it was worth. Capitalizing on the neighborhood boom. Getting every penny she could squeeze from my life. Listed 2 days after the crash. 2 days. Most people can't even plan a funeral that fast. There are many kinds of death, I realized. One is the body. The other is realizing you are no longer needed. Not as a person, just as property. Just as a number in a bank account. Just as an obstacle that's finally been removed. I lay in that bed for 3 weeks. Learning to sit up. Learning to eat without choking. Learning to walk 3 steps without collapsing. And the whole time, I made a plan. Not revenge. No, that's too hot, too messy. Something colder, justice, and I wouldn't raise my voice to do it. When I could finally sit up on my own, they gave me a mirror. I barely recognized myself. Bruises like ink blots. Hair matted and gray, grayer than before. Wrinkles that seemed deeper, carved by pain and betrayal. But my eyes still knew. They'd seen childbirth. They'd seen Walter's coffin lowered into frozen ground. They'd seen bankruptcy, betrayal, disappointment. They'd seen Candace grow from a baby into a stranger. They weren't done yet. June Mallow, I whispered to the woman in the glass. You're still here. No obituary. No funeral. No daughter holding my photo with puffy eyes and a black dress. Just a signature on a property listing and a voice saying, finally. That's when my plan solidified. I'd stay dead. Legally dead. Officially dead. Just long enough to see what people do when they think no one's watching. Just long enough to find out who I really raised. They moved me to a quieter wing once I could shuffle down the hallway. The nurses were kind but distant. The kind of kindness you give to someone whose name you won't remember next week. They called me Miss Doe, brought me warm broth, helped me shower, avoided the question in their eyes. Why hasn't anyone come for you? I didn't ask them to call my daughter, didn't give them a name to search for, didn't do anything except heal and watch and wait. You're a tough one doctor said, flipping through my charts without really looking at me. Most people wouldn't have made it through the second night. I wasn't tough, though. I was stubborn. There's a difference, you see. Toughness fights back. Stubbornness endures. It outlasts. It survives not because it's strong, but because it refuses to quit. I'd spent 72 years being stubborn. Stubborn enough to work 3 jobs after Walter died. Stubborn enough to raise a daughter alone. Stubborn enough to smile when she forgot my birthday. Stubborn enough to keep giving when she stopped saying thank you. And now I was stubborn enough to rise from the dead. 6 weeks after the crash, they released me to a rehabilitation center. Gray walls. Cheerful volunteers with painted-on smiles. Padded wheelchairs. Hymns playing softly in the common room every Sunday. I stayed another month. Relearning how to use a knife and fork without my hands shaking, how to shower without help, how to walk without a cane. But I didn't let them know I was getting stronger faster than they expected. I liked the silence. I liked that no one asked questions. I liked being no one. On paper, I was dead anyway. The authorities had misidentified a charred body at the crash site as mine. The dental records matched because I hadn't updated mine in 15 years. A clerical error. The kind that should never happen, but always does when no one's paying close enough attention. Candace had accepted it without hesitation. Signed papers. Scheduled a celebration of life. Not a funeral. No casket, no messy grief. Just brunch at a country club and a slideshow of smiling pictures that probably didn't include a single recent photo. The real estate listing went live 2 days after the crash. I already told you that, but what I didn't tell you was what came next. She was already spending the inheritance. My lawyer, Marvin, he'd worked with me for 20 years. Good man. Honest. The kind who remembers your birthday and asks how you're really doing. He'd reached out to Candace, asking for confirmation of probate proceedings. She'd replied within the hour, pushing for updates, asking about timelines, wanting to know when the accounts would transfer. She was in a hurry to bury me legally. What she didn't know was that I'd already made changes to my will. Years before the accident, after that last time she'd asked for money and I'd felt something inside me finally crack. Nothing was automatic. Nothing was guaranteed, and I was still alive, reading every email her eagerness left behind. The hospital forwarded me a sealed envelope, documents from the airline's legal team. I opened it with shaking hands. The numbers were clear. $18 million. That was the settlement offer. In exchange for no public statements, no lawsuits, no interviews. Just silence. $80 million for my silence, my pain, my shattered body, my lost life. I read it twice, then a third time. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just folded it carefully, placed it on the knitstand beside the rented hospital bed, and stared at the ceiling until the shadows moved across it. You bet I was thinking. Candace used to say I was bad with money. Said I had a scarcity mindset because I preferred saving to spending, because I packed lunches instead of dining out, because I drove the same car for 22 years. She called it being poor. I called it being responsible. And now? Now I was holding more wealth than she'd ever dreamed of. The airline wanted me gone, discreet, forgotten. Candace wanted me dead, buried, out of the way. I had no interest in giving either of them what they wanted. Instead, I made a phone call to the only person who'd ever asked me how I was doing without expecting a deposit afterward, Marvin, my lawyer. He didn't scream when he heard my voice, just went silent. Then quietly, June, where are you? Alive, I said, which is more than I can say for my reputation. We met 2 days later in a borrowed office downtown. I wore a scarf and sunglasses, not to hide exactly, just to shield myself from the strangeness of the world moving on without me. Marvin had tears in his eyes when he saw me. I didn't. I was past that. I want you to accept the settlement, I said, sitting across from him. But I also want control. Complete control, of course. And I want Candace nowhere near it. Not 1 red cent. He nodded, lips pressed thin. He'd always liked me. Never understood why Candace treated me the way she did. There's a trust, I continued. I want to set it up in Bree's name. My granddaughter. But with conditions. She doesn't get anything until she's 30. And she has to be free of her mother's financial influence. I want that ironclad. In writing. Legally bulletproof. Marvin took notes. Didn't argue. Didn't question. And I want you to buy me time. A year, no obituary. No statement, nothing. Just delay and misdirection. He looked up. You're planning something. No, I said. I'm planning not to be the fool who gave everything and was thrown away like garbage. He leaned back, studied me. You've changed. No, I replied. I just stopped pretending. The next morning, I checked myself out of the rehab center. Took a cab to a small town 3 hours away. Rented a 2-room apartment under a different name. June Emerson. Emerson was my grandmother's maiden name. She would have liked the poetry of it. I bought new shoes. A dark coat. A used car, nothing fancy. Honda Civic, 10 years old, reliable. I didn't look like a woman worth $18 million. But I looked like someone who had nothing left to lose. And in a way I didn't. Not anymore. The first time I saw my house again, I almost didn't recognize it. The hydrangeas I'd planted the year after Walter died, gone, dug up, tossed out, replaced by stone chips and something that looked like artificial turf. The front door had been painted a color I can only describe as fashionable beige. Even the wind chime was gone, the one Bree had made in 2nd grade. Shells and paint and wobbly handwriting that said, I love you, Grandma. Gone. There was a plastic sign in the yard. Under contract. I parked across the street behind a delivery van and watched. A young couple toured the front steps. The man pointed at the roof. The woman laughed, gesturing like she was already arranging furniture in her mind. And there was Candace, standing just behind them, dressed like a realtor, all white blazer and forced warmth. She didn't look like someone in mourning. She looked like someone closing a deal. They stepped inside and I stayed in the car. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. What did I expect to see? My old curtains in the window. A ghost of my former life in the frame of the porch. Instead, it all looked like a stage set. Like I'd never been there at all. That night, back in my small apartment, I opened the laptop Marvin had given me. New, untraceable, linked to a secure network. I logged into the private folder he'd set up. Inside was every email Candace had exchanged with the estate attorney. The one she assumed was now fully hers to command. She'd sent him photos of furniture she wanted appraised. My dining table, the one Walter and I had bought at an estate sale 30 years ago. Oak, solid. We'd eaten 1,000 meals at that table. Too dated for resale, someone had replied. Recommend donation. She'd emailed a moving company asking for a quote on storage. The old stuff can go, she'd written. Donate or dump. Whatever's easier. I scrolled through attachments. Images of my cedar chest. My mother's wedding quilt. The ceramic figurine Walter gave me on our 5th anniversary. Too shabby for resale, someone had noted. Will likely be discarded. That cedar chest was the only thing I'd brought with me when I married Walter. My mother had given it to me with shaking hands. Said, this held everything I owned when I came west, keep it close. And now it was marked for trash. Candace never liked that chest. Said it made the bedroom feel old. Said it was taking up space. She didn't want my memories. She wanted the square footage. 3 days later, I returned. Not to confront. Not yet. Just to witness. To watch what people do when they think no one's looking. Thursday afternoon. Warm. Overcast. I sat in a coffee shop window down the block. Ordered tea I didn't drink. Watched. Candace pulled up in a silver Audi. New, of course. Probably bought with a house deposit. She made a phone call. Sipped a green smoothie. Checked her reflection in the rearview mirror. Then Brie climbed into the passenger seat. My granddaughter. 17 now. Tall. Tired looking. But still with that crooked smile I remembered from when she was small. They didn't talk much. Just sat there. Brie kept her arms folded. Candace gestured a lot. Her voice rising, face tightening. I couldn't hear a word, but I knew that rhythm. It was the same one she'd used on me whenever she wanted to make something sound like my fault. Brie didn't argue. Just looked away. Out the window. At nothing. The Audi pulled off, and I followed at a distance. Not close. Just enough to keep them in sight. They drove to a storage facility on the edge of town. I watched as they unloaded boxes from the trunk. Candace had a clipboard. Brie had silence. And inside one of those boxes, I could see it. Through the open trunk, a small ceramic figurine of a horse. The one I'd kept on my windowsill for 30 years. Walter gave it to me on our 5th anniversary. Said it reminded him of my spirit. Wild but loyal. When Candace lifted the box, she tilted it sideways, careless. The figurine rolled, tapped the side, then vanished behind another box. She didn't even look. They left 20 minutes later. I waited, parked behind the building, watched the manager go inside. Then I stepped out, walked calmly to the dumpster. And there, in a pile of splintered wood and torn wrapping paper, was a broken frame. My wedding photo. Glass cracked down the center, right through Walter's face. I lifted it carefully, cradled it in my hands. They shook. Not from rage. That had burned off somewhere between the hospital and here. This was colder, more precise. A line had been drawn. She wasn't just getting rid of me. She was erasing me. I carried the frame back to the car, placed it gently on the passenger seat, looked at it, really looked. We were so young. Walter had that dumb grin he always made when he was nervous. My hair was too short, the veil crooked. But we were there, real. We'd built a whole life from that moment. A child, a home, a business, decades of dinners and dances and disagreements. And now Candace had boiled it all down to trash and contracts. That night, I called Marvin. She sold everything I said. My voice was steady, even my memory. Silence on the line. Then, what do you want to do? I looked at the crack in Walter's photo. I want a front row seat, I said, to the life she built on my grave. And when the moment comes, I'll let her see me, alive, whole, not to haunt her. To remind her what she lost. The law is slower than grief, but far more exact. Candace had filed a petition for a legal transfer of estate assets 5 weeks after the crash. She claimed expedited authority due to lack of next of kin. Lack of next of kin. As if I'd trapped into the world fully formed. Never mothered her through measles, heartbreak, or that third-grade science fair when she cried because her vinegar volcano wouldn't erupt. Marvin delayed the probate, silently, skillfully, no denials, no admissions, just missing documents, follow-up requests, misplaced emails. He filed quiet objections to each motion. The deceased's identity has not been conclusively verified. Further review is required. Pending clarification. The lawyer Candace hired grew impatient. She fired him, hired another. Meanwhile, she spent. The house sale had closed. She'd pocketed most of the cash. Then she bought herself a new office downtown, smaller, sleeker, full of glass walls and modern chairs. She moved her interior design firm there, rebranded it as a lifestyle curation agency. For crying out loud, lifestyle curation. She'd become the sort of woman who called herself self-made in LinkedIn bios, conveniently skipping the years when my checks paid her mortgage. Bree came to help on weekends. I watched from across the street, different coffee shops, different angles, always careful. The girl still wore sneakers with little drawings on the sides, probably something she'd doodled herself. She used to draw houses with hearts inside them. Now she unpacked vases in a space where I was no longer welcome. One morning, I followed Bree after she left the office. She walked alone, headphones in, bag slung over one shoulder. Her pace was slower than Candace's, softer. She stopped at a bookstore. I waited, then followed. Inside, I stayed by the magazines while she browsed the fiction shelves. She ran her fingers along the spines like they were sacred. Then she picked one and sat cross-legged in the far corner, reading like no one else existed. It nearly broke me. That was how she used to sit on my living room rug, reading until her head would slowly tilt and rest against the couch. Sometimes she'd fall asleep with the book still open in her lap, legs folded like a little bird. And now she sat the same way, but with a grandmother presumed dead, and a mother too busy staging life to actually live it. I left before she saw me, not because I didn't want her to, because I wasn't ready yet. Not for her, not for what would come after. Later that week, Marvin called. "She's trying to force distribution," he said, claiming undue delay. "We can hold a bit longer, but not forever." How much longer? A month? Maybe 2. She's running out of time. Yes, good. I spent the next 2 days making a list. Not of people, not of things, of truths. Truth 1, Candace did not cry when I was declared dead. Truth 2, Candace did not call hospitals. Truth 3, Candace did not wait for confirmation. Truth 4, Candace immediately began liquidating. Truth 5, Candace assumed all was hers. Truth 6, Candace erased me. But truth 7 was different. Truth 7, Candace never asked Bree how she felt about it. That was when I knew where the crack might live. Not in money. Not in law. In love. Bree still wore her grandmother's necklace, a tiny locket I'd given her at 13. Inside was a photo of Walter and me, our wedding day. Young and stupid and hopeful. She'd once told me she touched it during exams. "For luck, Grandma," she'd whispered. I didn't know if she still did, but she still wore it. That meant something. On Sunday, I returned to the block where my house had stood. The young couple had moved in. There were wind chimes on the porch now. Cheap ones, clinking tiny and thin. I stood across the street and stared. Not because I wanted the house back, but because I needed to remember what had been mine before it was sold like a used sofa. Then I walked 5 blocks to the cafe where Candace liked to hold her client brunches. She was there. White blazer again, perfect hair, talking with 2 women in soft pastels, laughing, touching her collarbone in that exaggerated way she used when trying to seem delicate. I sat at the counter. The server didn't question me. No one recognized me anymore. I watched her laugh, and I thought, this is what a woman looks like when she thinks she's won. She hasn't seen the board yet. By the time I walked back to my car, my decision had crystallized. I would go to her office, not to make a scene, not to yell or cry or demand, just to look her in the eye, to let her see in that quiet moment between one breath and the next that everything she thought buried had just stood up again. And it remembered everything. The receptionist smiled without recognition when I stepped into the office. That suited me fine. The lobby was all white marble and brushed gold, the kind of design that pretends to be minimal but screams money if you know where to look. The walls were bare except for one black and white photograph of Candace, arms crossed, chin tilted, eyes narrowed in that calculated confidence people practice in mirrors. "Do you have an appointment?" the receptionist asked. "Yes," I said calmly. "Tell Miss Mallow her 10 o'clock is here." She hesitated, glanced at her screen, then back at me. "I don't have anything at 10. She want to see me." The receptionist made the call. I heard Candace's voice through the phone, sharp, clipped. "What do you mean she's already here?" A beat of silence. "Fine, send her in." She didn't come to the door, didn't meet me halfway, just waited at her desk like the queen of some brittle little kingdom. The office was pristine. Glass desk, wall of carefully arranged books she hadn't read, large window with a view of the city, though her chair was turned away from it. She didn't care for views, only optics. She looked at me like I was a client, perhaps a difficult one. Then she blinked, once, twice. Her jaw moved slightly, but no sound came out. I stepped forward and closed the door behind me. No one else needed to hear this. "Hello, Candace," I said. She didn't speak. Her hands remained on the desk. Fingers spread slightly as if she were steadying herself against an earthquake. "You look well," I added, though I don't imagine the same can be said for your conscience. That snapped her out of it. Her face hardened like ice reforming. "What is this?" she asked, though her voice cracked. "Just slightly." "What? How?" "I survived." She stared. "No one called me." "No one said no one called," I agreed. "Because no one tried." She stood suddenly, pushing back the chair. What are you doing here? Why would you come like this? After all this time? To see how quickly you swept me out of your life? I thought you were dead." "Yes," I said. "That was convenient for you, wasn't it?" Her mouth opened, then closed again. I took a breath, looked around the room. "You redecorated again?" She said nothing. I stepped closer to the desk. Not too close. Just enough to make her shift backward slightly. "You sold the house 2 months after the crash. Donated my furniture. Threw out my wedding album. Moved into this glass box. Told people you built everything on your own." Her lips trembled, but only for a moment. "I mourned you," she said, but her voice was empty. "I did. I just didn't know what else to do." I looked at her, really looked. Her face was flawless, tight at the jawline, not a wrinkle in sight, but her eyes were tired, not from grief, from fear. "You didn't mourn," I said softly. "You prepared." Silence stretched between us like a wire pulled taut. "You weren't supposed to be on that flight," she said suddenly. "Desperate now. You changed plans. No one knew. You didn't tell anyone. Not even Bree. I left a voicemail the night before. You never called back." She looked down. "You just assumed," I continued. "Assumed it would be easy. That I conveniently died and left you the pieces to arrange as you liked. That no one would check. You don't know what it's been like," she said suddenly, angry. "This last year." "Oh, I do," I interrupted. Because I watched it. That stopped her. "I've been here. In this city. This whole time. I've seen the house. The parties. The clients. The brunches. The speeches about reinvention and rising from grief." I paused. "You didn't just erase me, Candace. You built a business on my grave." "That's not true," she whispered. "But it is. She slumped into her chair. I needed to move on, she said. Like that would make it forgivable. What was I supposed to do? Collapse? No, I said. You were supposed to remember who raised you? The silence in the room was suffocating. I reached into my coat and pulled out a small sealed envelope. She stared at it. This is a formal notification, I said. You'll be contacted by my attorney shortly. She reached for it, hesitated, then took it. What does it say? That I'm alive, and that I control every cent you were hoping to inherit. Her fingers tightened on the envelope. I turned toward the door. Wait, she said behind me. Why now? Why come now? I paused, my hand on the knob. Because I wanted to look you in the eye, Candace, I said, and see if there was anything left of my daughter in there. I didn't wait for an answer. I left her sitting behind that glass desk, holding the letter like it was a live wire, not yet realizing the current had already passed through. It took her 3 days to respond. Marvin forwarded me the email. Subject line, 1 word. Clarification. No greeting. No apology. Just a question about the legality of my reappearance and what it meant for previously assumed assets. Previously assumed assets? Not my mother, not June, not even her. Just assets? Marvin didn't reply right away. He called me instead. She's trying to be careful, he said. But she's rattled. Good. She's also in meetings with a second attorney. I can't name the firm yet, but she's looking for a workaround. She won't find one. No, he agreed. But she's the kind who keeps digging even after the ground is frozen. That night, I walked along the river. It was a habit I picked up in recovery. Moving slowly, letting my legs remember their strength. The doctor said it helped rebuild muscle memory. What they didn't mention was how it rebuilt other kinds of memory too. The kind that surfaces in silence. The kind you buried years ago thinking it would stay still. I remembered holding Candace as a baby, pressing her to my chest after Walter died. I buried him in a rented suit, paid for the service in installments, then gone home to a child who didn't understand why Daddy didn't come back. I remembered her tiny hand clutching mine, saying, "It's okay, Mommy, I'm here." And now I was here. But she wasn't. Not really. Candace had built a life where love was currency. Everything had value, but only if it could be spent. The next day, I went to the bank. Not to withdraw, to plant roots. I'd like to open a trust, I told the clerk. In the name of Brianna Claire Mallow. She blinked. Tapped keys. Is she your daughter? No, I said. My granddaughter. The clerk smiled. That's lovely. What kind of trust? One that protects her from everything she doesn't know she needs protection from. The paperwork took hours. I read every clause twice, then added my own. Bree would not access the funds until she turned 25. She would not be eligible if under the legal guardianship or financial control of her mother. She would not receive anything until she sat in person with my attorney and listened to the conditions herself. Not as punishment, as a warning. I left the bank lighter than I'd arrived. Not because I'd given Bree money, because I'd given her a future that her mother couldn't touch. That night, for the first time in months, I slept without waking. 2 weeks passed. I didn't hear from Candace again. Not directly, but I felt her, like a cold front moving into town. She posted a new photo on her business page. New beginnings. Stronger than before. Her eyes didn't look stronger. They looked cornered. Then Bree messaged me, not on social media, on email. The address I created after the accident. The one Marvin had passed along for legal updates. Subject line, "Is it really you?" I stared at it for a long time before opening. The message was short. "Grandma, I don't know if I'm allowed to write you. Mom says you're not well. She says things I don't understand. But I heard you came by her office, and I think I saw you a few weeks ago, near the bookstore. If it was you, I just want to say I'm glad. I hope you're okay. Love, Bree. I read it 4 times. Then I wrote back, Dear Bree, yes, it was me. And I'm well enough to know the truth now. Thank you for seeing me even when no one else did. There's more I need to say. Would you meet me? Just you. Love always, Grandma June. I didn't expect her to respond quickly, but she did. 3 hours later. Tell me where and when. I typed slowly, careful not to shake. Tuesday, 4 p.m., that little place with the lemon tarts you liked. Corner of Delaney and 3rd. She sent a heart emoji. Just that. And somehow it meant more than all the words Candace had spoken since the day she tried to sell my memory to the highest bidder. Bree was already there when I arrived. She sat at the window table, nursing a glass of water, her eyes flicking up every time the door opened. When I stepped in, she looked straight at me. No shock, no fear, just quiet, open recognition. She stood slowly. Hi, she said. It wasn't a question. It wasn't even tentative. It was a fact. Hi, I echoed. We hugged awkwardly, a little stiff, but her arms didn't let go too quickly. When she sat down again, I saw she still wore the silver locket. The chain was longer now, the clasp replaced, but it was unmistakable. You cut your hair, I said. She touched it. Felt like a change. It suits you. A server came by. I ordered coffee. Brie asked for lemon tart. Same as always. Less tension. Less drama. She's good at making you feel like you're the one making things hard. I nodded. I knew that trick. Lived it for decades. But then, Brie continued, she started telling me who to be. What kind of internships to take. Who to date. What to post. How to dress. And I started pushing back, quietly. She noticed. Sighed I was drifting. Called it a phase. Sighed I was ungrateful. Bree stared at the trees. She said the same thing about you. After the crash. That you were difficult, controlling, emotionally distant. That the house felt like a weight. She paused. I remember thinking, that's not grief. No, I said. It's not. A squirrel darted past the path. Somewhere nearby, a child shrieked with laughter. Bree looked at me again. So what now? I told you about the trust. She nodded. But there's more than money involved, I figured. You'll have to choose, I said. Not sides. Not between me and her. Between what's true and what's easier. Bree tilted her head. Thoughtful. That's not hard, she said. She met my gaze squarely. I used to think keeping quiet was loyalty, she said. Now I think it's just permission. I almost smiled. Smart girl, I murmured. Bree reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. She's going to come after you, she said. I think she already is. I'm not worried. She say you're unstable, that you disappeared on purpose. She twist it. I've survived worse than her narratives. Bree glanced down, then back up. If it gets ugly, what do you want me to do? I thought for a long moment. Stay clean, I said. Let her wreck herself. She's been writing her own ending for a year. Let her finish it. Bree looked relieved and a little sad. Do you ever miss the version of her that loved you? I didn't answer immediately. Then I missed the version of her that didn't need to win all the time. Bree nodded slowly. I'm going to move out, she said, almost as an afterthought. I've been saving. A friend of mine needs a roommate. It's not much, but it's mine. I reached for her hand. She let me take it. I'm proud of you, I said. Her eyes shimmered, but she didn't cry. Neither did I. We just sat there. The two of us, in the stillness of the park, not plotting, not hiding, just claiming space together. And somewhere far off, I imagined Candace pacing, dialing, demanding, trying to rearrange the story again. But this time, she'd find the ending already written, and it wasn't hers. The second time I walked into her office, I didn't wait for an invitation. The receptionist looked up, startled, She must have remembered me. Perhaps not as a name, but as the woman who'd arrived weeks ago and left something behind that made the walls tremble. "She's in a meeting," the girl stammered. "I'll wait inside." She hesitated. I kept walking. Candace's office door was half closed. I pushed it open, calm, steady, unhurried. Inside, she was pacing. On the phone, a tight line between her eyebrows. She turned, startled. "I'll call you back," she snapped into the phone, then hung up without waiting for a response. "June," she said, like she might say, "storm warning, Candace." Her arms crossed automatically. A physical barrier. I said nothing. Let her speak first. "You can't just barge in here." "I can. You're not well." "I'm better than I've been in years." She looked toward the hallway, as if checking for an audience. "What do you want?" she asked, low and sharp. "I've already taken what I want. I'm just here for the silence that comes after." She scoffed. "You think you're righteous, but you abandon everything." Disappeared, left me to deal with the wreckage. "You mean the house, the money, the life you built on a mistake you never corrected?" "I didn't know how to fix it. You didn't want to." Her mouth pressed into a line. "You sold the house, Candace? Not because you had to. Because you could. You weren't grieving. You were cleaning. I was surviving." "No," I said. "I survived. I crawled out of that crash with bones broken and blood in my lungs. I lay in a hospital bed while you took measurements for new countertops. I thought you were dead. You didn't check. I had to keep going." "No," I said. "You had to slow down, but that would have meant seeing what you'd become." She looked away. "I came here today to look at you," I said. "Not to yell, not to plead, just to see. And you know what I see?" She didn't respond. "I see someone who's still afraid. Not of me, of exposure. Of not being the hero in the story you tell everyone else. I never asked to be the villain. No one ever does. But you cast the role, Candace. You picked the scene. You closed the curtain." A flicker of something crossed her face. "Not regret, recognition." "You've always thought you were better than me," she whispered. "No," I said. "I always hoped you'd be better than this." She turned her back, walked to the window. "You ruined everything." I stepped forward. "No," I said. "I remembered everything. You tried to forget." She turned sharply. "What do you want from me? An apology? A confession? A headline?" "None of that." "Then why are you here?" "To show you I'm not afraid anymore. And you should be." She stared at me. "You still think you have control?" I said quietly. "But you don't. Bree knows the truth. The courts know the truth. The money's locked. The house is gone. The legacy already shifted." Candace's shoulders sagged. Not from defeat, from exhaustion. The effort of keeping up the story was breaking her down faster than I ever could. "You raised a smart girl," I added. "And she made a smarter choice. I gave her everything." "No," I said. "You gave her conditions. I gave her space." A long silence followed. Not angry, just hollow. Finally, she asked, "What happens now?" "I leave," I said. "You stay and live with what you did." I turned to go. "Wait," she said, voice suddenly fragile. "Do you hate me?" I paused at the door, considered. "No," I said. That would mean I still expected something. I didn't slam the door. I closed it like you close the cover of a book you're never going to open again. The office was small, tucked above a bakery that smelled like burnt sugar and fresh bread. Marvin chose it for privacy, not prestige. No polished reception. No glass doors. Just a heavy file cabinet, a pot of coffee that had been sitting too long, and a man who'd known my signature longer than most had known my name. He stood when I entered. "June," he said simply. "Let's begin." He didn't offer small talk. He knew me better than that. I sat down. He opened the folder. "Here's the trust," he said. amended to reflect your final stipulations. It will be irrevocable upon your signature. The sum, I know the sum, I interrupted. What matters is what comes after. He nodded. This document establishes the June Mallow Foundation for Transitional Women, he continued. Mission: to assist women aged 50 and above in regaining financial and legal independence after spousal loss or family displacement. I read the clause again. Add a line, I said. We help the ones no one checks on. Marvin smiled briefly. Done. He flipped to the next section. Regarding your estate, property, residual assets, investment accounts, all shall transfer to the foundation, excluding the trust designated for Brianna Claire Mallow. He paused. You're sure? Yes. She inherited directly at 25? No, earlier. No exceptions. And Candace? She receives nothing? Not in cash. Not in kind. Not even mention. He didn't blink. Just made a note. I signed the first document, then the next. Each signature came easier than the last. Not because the weight lessened, but because I was no longer carrying it alone. We moved to medical directives. Should you become incapacitated, Marvin said gently. You've designated Brianna as your healthcare proxy? Yes. And power of attorney. She have it when she's ready. Until then, you hold it. He nodded. And if Candace challenges any of this, she can try. He smiled again. Not wide, but enough. We moved on. Final arrangements. Burial or cremation. No ceremony, I said. No eulogies. Write this in, let the quiet speak for her. She said what she needed to while she lived. Marvin's pen paused mid-stroke. Then he wrote it exactly as I said. By the time we were done, the sun had shifted across the window, casting long shadows across the file. He closed it. Do you want to keep a copy? No, but give one to Bree when the time comes. Marvin folded his hands on the desk. You're certain about all of this? Yes, it's generous. It's intentional. He leaned back, looked at me with something like respect. I've known you a long time, Joan, he said. But I've never seen you this clear. I was waiting, I said, for the noise to stop, and now I can hear my own voice again. I stood. Smoothed my coat. At the door, he asked one more thing. If Candace tries to apologize, she won't. But if she does, I looked back at him. She'd be speaking to someone who no longer owes her the courtesy of listening. Outside, the street was quiet. I walked slowly, letting the autumn wind tug at my sleeves. I passed a woman sitting on a bench, clutching a paper bag like it was gold. Her hands trembled. I nodded to her. She nodded back. No words. Some things didn't need saying. I'd spent 72 years waiting for someone to come save me from the slow erasure of being needed only in pieces. Money, advice, shelter, silence. And now? Now I had a foundation, not just in ink and structure, and knowing. Knowing who I was, what I wouldn't allow again. And who, when everything else falls away, will remember me not for what I gave up, but for what I reclaimed. The letter arrived on a Thursday, hand-delivered. No warning. Candace had just finished a client call when the receptionist buzzed through. There's a courier here. He says it's for you. Personally, have him leave it. He says it's by instruction. Hand off only. Candace sighed. Fine, send him in. The man was plain. Khakis, windbreaker, clipboard. He didn't linger. Just handed over a thin envelope with her name typed neatly in the center. Have a good day, he said, then walked out without looking back. Candace stared at the envelope, no logo, no markings. She opened it. Inside, a single page, letterhead, simple, legal, subject, formal notification of estate closure and financial forfeiture. She read the first line, then again, and again. Her hands began to tremble. Marvin's name was there, of course, always Marvin. Loyal, gray, quiet Marvin. The language was dry, impersonal. Per section 4, Clause B of the revised estate directive, executed under the full legal and medical capacity of June Eleanor Mallow. All previously assumed claims on property, assets, and inheritance under your name are hereby nullified. Effective immediately. The letter explained the trust for Brianna, the foundation, the updated will. It confirmed, in precise language, what Candace had feared but refused to admit. Her mother had returned, had rewritten the narrative, and had done it completely. There was no money coming, no residuals, no fallback. Everything she quietly considered hers, already spent in plans and promises, was gone, legally, irrevocably, and most cruelly. Cleanly, there was no scandal, no accusation, no dramatic confrontation she could counter or spin. Just finality. Candace sat back in her chair. Her hands were still on the paper, but her eyes were unfocused now. Staring somewhere beyond the edges, the office felt colder than usual. She read the letter again, this time slower. There was a single line near the end. Brief, unadorned, placed like an afterthought. No further correspondence is required. She crumpled the letter in one hand, then stopped, uncrumpled it, smoothed the creases with flat palms. A part of her wanted to call Marvin, demand explanation, threaten legal action. But she knew it wouldn't change a thing. This wasn't a challenge, it was a conclusion. And conclusions couldn't be undone with posture or pressure. She sat there for a long time, long after the office emptied for lunch. The clock ticked, her phone buzzed. Her laptop blinked with reminders, but she moved only once to open her drawer, pull out a small square photo in a cheap plastic frame. It was the only one she still kept of the three of them. Walter, June, Candace at 7 on her mother's lap. Grinning with missing front teeth, she stared at it, not with nostalgia, but with an emptiness that finally had form. She had won so quickly, and lost so thoroughly, and no one, not a single soul, was coming to explain why. Because she already knew. The house looked smaller now. Not because it had changed, but because I had. Something about survival shrinks the myth of place. You start to see not the size of the rooms, but the echo in them. The weight of who spoke loudest. The silence you once let settle in the corners. I parked across the street, same as before. No tinted windows, no disguise. I didn't care who saw me. A new family lived there now. Young couple, child, tricycle in the yard, soccer ball under the bush. There were curtains in the window I never would have chosen. Floral with too much yellow. A ceramic rooster perched on the porch rail. It made me smile. I didn't come to trespass or to speak. I came to remember without mourning. I watched the mother step onto the porch. She called a name I didn't catch, something short and sweet. And the child, maybe 4 years old, ran out with wild hair and socks that didn't match. She laughed. That big, clumsy laugh children make when they're not trying to be charming. For a moment, I saw Candace, 3 years old, running through a sprinkler in the same yard, water in her eyes, screaming with joy. And then I remembered the night she was 16, yelling at me from the porch steps, saying I didn't understand anything, that I made everything harder, that she couldn't wait to leave. Both memories lived in this grass. Both belonged to me. I didn't look away. The front door had been repainted, sage green. The number plate replaced, my wind chime gone. But the porch creaked the same when the woman stepped inside. Child in tow. Leaving the door ajar just long enough for warm music to spill into the air, I exhaled. I had planted roses along the side fence once. There was no trace of them now. Just mulch and a row of new shrubs that looked too orderly for this kind of home. It didn't hurt. It didn't need to. I wasn't here to reclaim anything. This was no longer my house. But it would always be the place I became someone no one expected me to be. A wife, a mother, a widow, and eventually a woman who chose to stop disappearing. I stepped out of the car, walked across the street, stopped just before the driveway. No need to go further. I stood there, looking up at the window that used to be my bedroom. I remembered the sound of rain against it, the hum of the old fan, Walter snoring softly beside me, the quiet, the long, aching quiet of someone waiting to be thanked. But no one owes you gratitude for what they never saw you lose. And maybe that was the hardest part, not being unloved, but being unseen. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out a photograph, an old one, faded at the edges. It was me on the porch, barefoot, laughing at something Walter had said, with Candace curled in my lap. Bree must have taken it. Too young to frame it right, but still catching what mattered. I crossed the driveway, placed it gently under the mailbox, weighted it with a small flat stone. Then I turned back. I wasn't leaving a message, just the fact I had been here, and I no longer needed to prove it. As I walked away, the breeze shifted. The new wind chimes played a different tune than mine ever did. Lighter, almost sharp, but still music. Still something that moved when the air insisted, and I let it play me out. Bree arrived just before noon. She didn't knock. She never did anymore. Just let herself in, kicked her shoes off by the door, called out, "It's just me," like she had when she was 10. Afraid of startling me if I was napping. "I hope you're hungry," she said, lifting a brown paper bag. That old man at the deli finally got the potato salad, right? I was already at the table, 2 plates out, forks aligned like I still cared about symmetry. She unpacked the bag with practiced ease. Sandwiches, a salad, 2 apples, a bar of chocolate we'd split later without discussing it. She poured water into mismatched glasses and sat across from me like it was any other Tuesday. I didn't say much, neither did she. That was the beauty of it now. What used to be silence between us had become ease. We ate slowly, no rush. She told me about a class she was taking. Art history, something elective. Something that didn't count for anything except my own joy. I told her that was the only kind of learning worth anything at all. "You sound like a fortune cookie," she said, smiling. "You sound like someone finally doing what she wants." Maybe I am. We didn't talk about Candace. Not because we were pretending she didn't exist, but because in that moment she didn't matter. I watched Bree tuck her hair behind her ear, saw the way her hands moved when she talked, still expressive, still bright. Her face had changed just slightly in the past year, less soft, more deliberate. But the girl I'd once read stories to was still in there, just taller now, and wise in a way I'd never been at her age. After lunch, we went out to the small back patio. One kept a few potted herbs there. Nothing ambitious. Just mint, rosemary, thyme. Things that reminded me of seasons and purpose. Bree knelt beside the largest pot. "This one needs water. You're letting it dry out. I was waiting for you to notice." She looked up, smirked. "You're annoying. You're slow." She laughed, then went inside to fill the watering can. When she came back, I sat in the sun, letting it rest on my arms like something earned. She poured gently, carefully, like she understood what too much care could do. When she finished, she didn't stand. She stayed crouched beside the pot, picking at a leaf. "I think I'm going to apply for that gallery internship." "The one in Portland?" She nodded. "I've been scared to leave." "You're not leaving." She looked at me, unsure. "You're moving forward? Big difference." She swallowed. "What if I miss you?" "You will." That made her eyes wet. "Just a little." "Will you miss me?" she asked, quieter, every damn day. She smiled through it, wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. "Good." I leaned back in the chair. Let the moment stay exactly where it was. The wind picked up, brushing the trees gently. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. A siren faded. The world went on. "You know," I said, not opening my eyes, "when I was your age, I thought healing meant forgetting, moving on, pushing through. And now?" I paused. "Now I think it just means telling the truth over and over until it stops hurting to say it out loud." Bree nodded. "Even if no one believes it?" "Especially then." We sat like that for a long time, not talking, not needing to. Before she left, she hugged me hard. Not polite, not short. She held on. I'm proud of you, I whispered. She squeezed tighter. When she pulled away, she said, You changed everything, you know. I shook my head. No, I just stopped pretending. She looked at me for a moment longer, then laughed. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't moved, but because I was full. And sometimes that's all peace is. Not the absence of pain, just the moment when pain finally has nowhere else to go. I stood there on the patio, feeling the sun, hearing the wind, alive, not in the way that's measured by breath or heartbeat, but in the way that's measured by choice. I chose to survive the crash. I chose to stay silent. I chose to watch. I chose to act. I chose truth over comfort. I chose Brie over Candace. One chose myself over the role I'd been assigned. And now? Now I choose to live the rest of my days, knowing that I am not what was taken from me. I am what I refuse to give up. My voice, my truth, my worth. They tried to bury me. They didn't know I was a seed.